Welcome to the Color Adventure. I'm your host, Igor Puente, and I'm here to bring you into the magic and mysteries of color. This is the second episode of the series that will go around the color wheel, discovering the history and curiosities of the different colors we deal with in our everyday life. Blue, a color beyond the sea. Blue is a color that has a great evolution along human history. Like human history, blue has many good stories and facts. In order to be able to talk about most of them, I decided to divide this color into different episodes. We can start talking about the first two concepts that arrive to our mind in the moment that we see blue: the sky and the ocean. The funny thing is that when we think about the sky and the ocean, we know that they are not really blue. Or is the air in our atmosphere blue? Or the water in the ocean? We know that it's not. And to understand this, we have to make a travel to a time not too different to the one that we are living at this moment. We have to travel back to the times of Isaac Newton. In 1665, London was also in lockdown, the plague killing 100,000 people, nearly a quarter of the population of the city. The city was closed to traffic. There were neither carnivals or fairs. This sounds pretty familiar of what we have been living in the last couple of months, right? Universities were also closed, leaving Isaac Newton with a good amount of spare time in his room. He used this spare time to experiment with the things he could find around him. This is the moment when he saw an apple falling from a tree of the garden and worked out the law of gravity. But, more important for us, he found two prisms in his room to experiment with. Everyone in those times knew that if you let white light coming from the sun, it will create a rainbow with a multicolored image of the sun. But what anyone realized before him was if you put another prism upside down collecting this rainbow, it will become white light again. This brought him the conclusion that all white light is made from all the colors of the rainbow. And here is where we can start understanding why we see the sky blue. The white light is made by the different wavelengths of the colors of the rainbow. These wavelengths are different among the colors. Red are the biggest ones, while blue-purple are the smaller ones. These big wavelengths pass through the atmosphere without much problem, but the tiny blue and purple ones get scattered by the oxygen and hydrogen molecules, creating the effect of blue. This is also why when there are big particles in the atmosphere, as rocks when there is a volcanic eruption, even the big red ones get scattered, giving us the crazy red skies that we see in those moments. This is the same effect that happens in the ocean. But even the ocean have a bigger complexity because all the things that are diluted in the water, plus of course the reflection of the sky in it. But our concept of blue sky and blue ocean has not always been like that. Blue is one of the colors that was introduced later on in our vocabulary. There were civilizations that didn't have even a word for this color. Actually, in most contemporary European languages, the word will come from black or green, and not for anything blue in life. There are some civilizations, like the Egyptian one, that had blue in their vocabulary, and even create their own blue pigment. Others, like Greeks, didn't. The Odyssey doesn't have any reference to blue. Kind of weird in a story that has most of his action in sailing. This brings some historians into crazy ideas, like that Greeks were colorblind. But the essence of the word blue is present in other cultures, as Hebrew, Japanese or Chinese, making it not a rare thing in the past. Some cultures have a blurry limit between blue and green. What is not a surprise, knowing that they are side by side in the color spectrum, and that there are people that like it perception. Also, many of these things, like the ocean that we perceive as blue, often change between blue and green. But let's talk about blue in Egypt. They were one of the first civilizations giving blue a special role in their world. For Egyptians, blue was the color of the sky, the divinity, and the Nile River, the creation. There were many times that the gods were represented with blue skin. They were one of the first ones in use lapis lazuli in their artwork, but they were only used as a stone, because they didn't know how to transform it into a pigment. Egyptians created the first synthetic pigment. This pigment is known as Egyptian blue. Egyptian blue was created in a really similar way of glass. The ingredients were pretty easy to find for them, some minerals as malachite and limestone and some sands. The trick part was the process, that had to be done in a really precise way, or it wouldn't turn how it would work. From the result of this process, done at the correct temperature with the correct amount of oxygen, it will turn out in a solid opaque blue crystalline material that when it's ground into powder gives you a really resistant blue. This pigment has been recorded to be used till Roman times, and when the formula was lost, the process was that difficult that nobody was able to figure it out till the end of 19th century. After this Egyptian pigment, we will have to talk about the one and only, the ultramarine blue, the blue beyond the sea. That's literally what it means in Latin. Ultra means beyond, and marine means sea. This blue is made with a stone called lapis lazuli. This is a really rare stone that comes from a chain of mountains in Afghanistan. These mountains are called Sar-e-Sang, literally the Valley of the Stone. Imagine, since that stone left Afghanistan, how far it had to go till it arrived to places like Italy or Spain where the artists were waiting for this blue pigment. That made this stone have an insane value in those times. Its weight was more expensive than gold. This was the nightmare of Renaissance artists, who were not able to afford this blue pigment and always have to wait their patron brought them the pigment. Many paints were never finished, cause the artists couldn't find on time an affordable way to get this pigment. Because it was the most expensive color and it was also the color of the sky, Virgin Mary was the one that always wore blue clothes. Anyone who saw that blue in a paint would know that the paint was important and have a really big value. There are 3 grades of this rock that you can extract from the Afghan mines. These grades are really difficult to differentiate when they are in raw form. To separate these grades, the workers of the mine assess the stone with the light of the sunrise or sunset. The first one is called Rang-e-ob, that means color of the water. It's the darkest one and is a common word also to call blue. The second one is Rang-e-sab, that means green. And the most precious of all, Surpar, or red feather. What a funny thing that the most beautiful and precious of all the blues will be named after red. This is because this is the color that represents the deepest color that you can find on the fire, the very heart of the flame. The value of the stone raised one of the highest in the 19th century. This resulted in an artist society from France to make a contest looking for the person that created a synthetic version of this ultramarine blue, whose cost didn't exceed the 300 francs per kilogram. This prize was earned by Jean-Baptiste Guimet, and the pigment was called French ultramarine, to differentiate it from the natural pigment. It's funny how blue had a really blurry start in the beginning. There have been cultures that don't even mention it, but now it's by far one of the favorite colors of the people. And that's all about blue for today. We will continue with more fun and histories about this color in the next episode. The paint from this episode will be for sale at my website, theredcrownmagic.com, with a limited edition of 20 reproductions hand adjusted with real watercolor. With this, you will be able to support the project and help me invest in more tools and books for the creation of it. But remember that the best way to support this show is by spreading the word between other artists or anyone curious about color. Of the 2 care packages is being announced in the Instagram post related with this episode, and the next one will be announced with the second part of this episode. You can find the writing blog with more visual information and the downloads at www.theredcrownmagic.com/blog and Instagram under The Color Adventure. You can also find more information and personal work on my Instagram, The Red Crown Magic, and my website, www.theredcrownmagic.com. This podcast will be shortly available in all podcast platforms and as a time-lapse on the YouTube channel under The Color Adventure. If you have any topics or suggestions that you want to talk in this podcast, send me an email through thecoloradventure@theredcrownmagic.com. Next episode episode and blog post will be released on Friday, February 26th. And also this day I will release an announcement related with a new Patreon group. Thank you so much for listening, subscribe, share, and don't forget to paint a little bit.